Okay, in the last video, just to recap a little bit here, we talked about the fact that this little plus sign here is the overflow icon, letting you know that in the area type there is more text than can fit in here. So if we click on this with the selection tool, it will give us a loaded type cursor, which we then we have a couple options. One of them is to draw a new text box. And then that text automatically overflows from this box into this box. And actually it doesn't end here. It goes on and we could create another one. But before we do that, let's go back to what I was saying, that these text boxes, if they're being used in a design, should really be the exact same width or clearly a different width, just for visual unity's sake. And the way that we can figure out how big this box is we go up to type, we go to area type options, and then there's our width. And then I can simply Command C to copy that, click on OK. Now click on this one, repeat the same steps to get the area type options open, and then click on to select this width, and then Command V to paste what I selected from the other one. Now they're the same size. Okay, so we not only is that the only way we can work? Let's look at some others. Let's say if I wanted for this to flow into, let's say, an unusual shape. So let's just make a circle here. And so I can load this cursor again. Just click, it becomes loaded. There we go. And then I come over here, click on this. As soon as it realizes that it's loaded text and it's on the path of this circle, it will go ahead and put that next bit of information in here. Now, and then as you adjust the size of these, this became smaller, so now more goes into here. This becomes bigger or smaller. It changes what shows up into the next boxes. Just because you set it up this way doesn't mean you're stuck with that. So if I click here, well, actually, let me create another shape first. So let's say I make this shape right here, and I want the text, instead of going from here to here to here to here, I want it to go from here to here to here. So what I can do is just come over here, click in there. I get this little icon that shows me that that's broken now. Come over to here, click, and now the text goes, just like I said, follows this path. We'll now move on to the subject of creating type along a path. So let me just go ahead and select all this and delete it. So the best way to explain this is to start on an open path. So I'm just going to take the pen tool and I'm going to draw an open path here. So click here, click and drag here to give us a little bit of an arc. And then notice that we've done all this work with text, and so far we've only used just the first text tool. Now there is type on a path tool, but again the type tool is smart enough that when we get over a path it automatically changes to that tool anyway. So if I click here, make this a little bit bigger, my type now follows this path. Oh, and it looks like it has a strike through. So let me just select all of it, get rid of that. So that was just left over from when we were monkeying around in the character palette. So with that type selected, I'll just click on strike through again, and now that's gone. So I want you to notice there's some similarities between typing on a path and the area type. You actually have an import and an outport. Now this line right here represents the starting point on the path. This one represents the end, or actually this is the center point. So let me make my path a little smaller so you can see the start and end of it here. There we go. Okay, so this is your center point. This is the end point. So if I bring the end point over all the way to where there's not enough room for that type, notice that you get the plus sign, so you get an out port. So yes, you could actually go and extend these from place to place. And so another thing that's kind of interesting here, this being your center point, if we go up here to, well, if we can either go to the paragraph panel or we can just go up here, and if we center it, then it's going to center around that, and if we bring it to the right, it's going to go over to that side. Hopefully you notice when I changed the size of the box that the bounding box on here, it did have an effect on the type size, but hopefully you remember also that all we need to do to fix that is select all of this text, and I just clicked a couple times in there to select all of it, and go over here to the character panel, make sure all the options are shown, and just make sure both of these are set at 100%, and there's the type back to normal. Now, when you type on a path, you definitely will have to go in and kern. So that's a good lesson there. Go back and look at the kerning video, and once you get this exactly the way you want it, try to make it look as perfect as possible. Another thing that this center point does is if I click on it and drag downward, it will actually change the orientation of the type. So it's now hanging from the bottom of this path. And of course, the path that I drew does not show up, so it doesn't matter how thick the stroke is or what color the stroke is on it. And if you wanted this type placed exactly in the center point of the line that you drew, you could drag this all the way to the right, this one all the way to the left, and then choose center justified. Another interesting thing is that the path itself isn't set in stone. So if you remember back of the ways you can edit a path, we can actually click on this thing to, let's see, let's click away, click on it, and then you can see here's the handle that we drew, so I could actually change the arc of this path right now. So that's pretty interesting. I did that just by clicking away and then clicking on where that path is with the direct selection tool. Now let's move on to typing on a closed path. So you could draw your own closed path, and closed path just means that it comes together where this one starts here, finishes here, doesn't come all the way together. So pretty much the big example is your circle. And now it's a little bit different, and then if I take the regular text tool and try to click on here and type, it recognizes the fact that there's an area in there, so it by default is going to give me the area type tool. So I have two choices. I can go in here and I can grab the type on the path tool, or if you don't like to switch the tools, you can just remember to click on the option tool and click. And in this mode, it's usually best to work center. So it'll make things make a little bit more sense. So I'm just typing out a little bit of text after doing that, and then I have my same options here where I can click on this center point, and it actually needs to go right at the very bottom here. And I can use the smart guides to help me align that. And so now with center type and this center point being right at the very bottom, now the text is working just fine. Now a lot of times you'll see logos where there's type on the top and the bottom, so that's a little bit trickier, but we'll tackle that next. Let me just show you what happens if you try to put text on the bottom of the circle only. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to drag this over here, hold down the Option key at the same time so that I'm making a copy of it. And if we move this around, and again we'll use the guides here to help us center it. Text is wanting to disappear here because I ran out of room, so I just grab this and drag it all the way around like that. Okay, so the problem is that the text here reads left to right, but this way it no longer reads left to right. So we would need to fix that. So just so that there's going to be room for both of these, let me select all this and make it just a little bit smaller. It's 18 right now, so let's change it to 15 point type. Okay, and then we're going to select this, and we'll just change this word to bottom. And we'll also make it 15. Actually, we're going to need to make this a little bit smaller, so let's make it obviously smaller. We'll go to 12 with it. Now, just like you saw on the earlier steps when we did path on an open or type on an open path, we can grab that center point, which is the longest one sticking out here, and drag it like that, and it'll turn the type upside down. If you're having a hard time selecting it, you can always go in there and try to move these apart a little bit, and then the center comes down here. But either way that you get there, you just want to make sure now that this is centered perfectly up and down on the circle. So I'm going to go back to all three of these together because at least that way I know where the center is. And if I put that perfectly up and down, one more time. Okay, let's close this back up, being difficult. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm after. So now I have this on the top, this on the bottom, and just so that everything looks uniform enough here, I'm going to change this to the same type size, just so it doesn't look like there's any optical illusions going on here. So now what we want is these two to line back up. An easy way to do that is just select both, not this one, but both of these, and we'll just use the little, come on. Actually, okay. Here we go. If I just click right on the center of this one and try to get real close to the center of this one, it should tell me when they align. There. Telling me that they're centered. Now the only problem is that this one's sitting on top of the circle and this one's sitting on the bottom, which is the way that it makes the type line up. The only problem that we have is that they look like they have a different offset. So we're going to use something that we talked about earlier. We're going to select all of this text here, and we're going to go over to the character palette, and we're going to use the baseline shift. So I'm going to put my cursor in there, and I'm going to hit this until that text looks like it's perfectly aligned on the outside of the circle. Now notice that it did get spread out, so then I'm also going to have to adjust the tracking, and then once I get the tracking looking good for most of the letters, I would then have to go in and probably do some individual kerning. But that is how you do it, and then you may have to just adjust the text a little bit if everything's not perfectly lined up.